Thanks everybody for joining me. Good morning. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen like a phone. If you're on a larger screen like a computer, should be to the right of the video. So we're starting with Rich says Q hello 11 wood out of rough, short, ugly pop-ups lately. Advice, thanks. Well, if you have a lie, that can happen if you have a lie in the rough where the rough is kind of holding up the ball like it's on a tee. So whenever I have a lie like that, I actually kind of hover the club a little bit, and I almost imagine like I'm hitting the ball off of the tee, right? So if you imagine here, like normally we would kind of be like this. If it's just like a normal fairway lie where the ball's, it's on the ground, right? And in that situation, I need to kind of go and get it, right? I have to hit down on it a little bit to make sure that I'm making good ball first contact. But when the ball is like elevated, when it's on the rough, right? If we make that same kind of swing, we may get under it and pop it up, kind of like what you're talking about. So what I would do in that situation, if you kind of imagine this ball is in the rough and the rough's kind of holding it up, what I would do is I would kind of hover the club, right? And then I want to imagine like I'm coming in and like I'm hitting that ball like it's elevated off of the tee. That should help with that. And practice that, right? But you can't, like, in that situation, you probably can't go get it. Now, if the ball's sitting down in the rough, you're not going to pop that up, right? You're going to have to kind of go down and go get that one. But if it's sitting up in the rough, if you get too much down underneath it, you can get that pop up that you're talking about. So Rich goes on to say, Q, I get too quick in takeaway and thereafter start thinking too much about mechanics. Thoughts, please. Practice. When you go to the range, practice. Good tempo and things like that. So that way, when you go out to the course, you can be as autonomous as possible. Ideally, that's what you want to have. You don't want to have a ton of swing thoughts. You want to be as autonomous as possible. If because ideally when you go out, like I said, you want to be as autonomous as possible. But if you have to have a swing thought, because if you go out there and you're trying to be autonomous, sometimes your autonomous isn't very good, right? So you'll have tendencies like maybe you're hitting it off the toe, or the ball's kind of tailing off to the right, or something like that. The face is too open from that. Well, then when we use swing thoughts, right? When we get mechanical, well, first of all, what I would do is change your intention first, right? So what that means is let's say that the ball's tailing off to the right? Well, if that's what's happening, then my face is too open. Then I need to come through contact and try to get that ball to start more to the left, right? Try to get that face closing down a little bit more. If that doesn't, that would be like changing intention. That'd be more of like an external focus. If that doesn't work, then in that case, I might go more internally, which would be more mechanical, right? So that'd be thinking about, strengthening the grip, or, bowing my lead wrist down, or something like that, rolling my hands over harder through impact, things like that. Those would all be things to help you to get that club face more close. So, like I said, when you go to the course, try to be as autonomous as possible. Don't overthink it. See ball, hit ball, right? Trust your swing to do its job. And if things are off, then what I would do is I would just try to change your intention to improve your ball flight or contact, whatever that is. So that means if you're hitting it off the toe, try to hit it off the heel, vice versa. If you're hitting it thin, try to hit it higher in the face. If you're chunking it, try to hit the ground more in front of the ball, right? So those would be like changing your intention. And then if that doesn't work, it would be, okay, I need to think internally about this. So let's say I'm chunking it. It might be, okay, I want to make sure that I push off my trail side to get that spot in front. Keep in mind, any swing, this is my cardinal rule on swing thoughts. If you have a swing thought, it absolutely must improve your ball flight or contact. It must. If it doesn't, then it is just not worth thinking about it. I find that a lot of people are out there, they're thinking a ton, and I can tell because they're standing over the ball for 10 minutes. I mean, exaggerating, but they stand over the ball forever because just all these thoughts are going, I got to do this, got to do that. You can't play golf that way. It's just not going to work. That's making you worse typically. So if you're going to have a swing thought, it has to be to improve your ball flight and contact. Try to keep it simple as much as you can, and you'll be more successful that way. So Tim G says, how do I stop flipping or scooping chip shots? Yeah, so use less wrist hinge and more body turn, right? So when we're chipping, right, if we're kind of lifting up and bending the arms a ton, you're going to tend to have kind of a flippy motion. So what we want to feel is that I would try to feel like you're chipping more with your chest. You're keeping your hands soft and quiet, and we're not bending our arms a ton, right? We're keeping the arms relatively relaxed and straight, and the wrists, again, relatively relaxed and not bending a ton. And I would try to feel like you're turning your chest back and through. If you do that, so if I set up, and I would also set up with some shaft lean, right? That can help you to get that at impact. So if you set up with some shaft lean, right? And then I just focus on turning my chest back and through and staying nice and relaxed with everything. Well, look what happens. I can come in and I'm not going to have that flippy motion, right? If I'm trying to do everything, if I keep my body really, really quiet and I try to do everything by bending my right arm and my right wrist, you're going to tend to have a flippy motion. A good drill that you can do to get better at this is to take an alignment stick, take half of it, put half of it down the shaft, half of it out the butt into the club. Now I'm going to set up like this, and I can just practice basically that motion, right? And the goal would be to come through and not let this stick touch you, right? So I'm going to come back. You can see how that stick's not touching me. And I'm going to turn through, right? So back, turn through. Get to where you can do that without a ball, then add a ball, and take your time with it. Again, chipping is not something that we need a lot of speed for. We can go nice and slow with it, nice and easy, good tempo. And that's what you're typically going to see in the best chippers. You're not going to see a lot of quick movements. It's usually kind of back and through. Like if I was going to toss a ball, back and through. That's the feeling that I want to have with it. All right, keep the questions coming. I got plenty of time left here. So Calabetta says, what are your suggestions for improving face contact location? I tend to strike the ball closer to the heel and can't hit one off the toe to save my life. Yeah, so basically, as far as for getting rid of heel strikes, right? What I would try to do is change your intention, right? And you just need to exaggerate as much as you need to be able to happen. I'll go over a couple tricks that kind of help you with that. So like if I was someone who struggled with a heel tendency, like what you're talking about, what I would try to feel like is that I'm coming in and I'm hitting the ball right there. That would change my intention to hitting the ball way off the toe. Now, if that still doesn't get me on the, really commit to it, by the way, right? I find that a lot of people they do this, but they don't really commit to it. They kind of half-heartedly do it because they're afraid something bad's going to happen. Well, what we have to understand is that you're hitting it off the heel. It's already bad, right? So what's the worst thing that can happen? You'll hit it off the toe, right? If you hit it off the toe, that's great. That means that we've moved the strike, and all we have to do now is just tone that down a little bit. So don't be afraid of something bad happening. You're already trying to get rid of something bad. So we got to adjust our field to get the desired result that we want. Now, if you're really doing your hardest, and you still cannot get that strike in the center of the face from feeling like that, then what you may need to feel like is that you're coming in like this, right? And some people say, like, I'm trying for the life of me to do it, but I can't do it. But think about it this way, right? If I had you set up, and I had you set up like this, and with the club on that side of the stick, do you think you can make a swing where the club hits the ground and you hit the ground on this side of the stick? Of course you can, right? I think anybody could perform that task. Well, then that means that you certainly can move that strike to the toe, right? It's just a matter of really committing to it and letting it go, getting out of your comfort zone, right? So here's a couple tricks that can also help you to do it. These would be like what you would want to do if and only if changing your, really exaggerating that toe strike doesn't get that strike more, off of the heel and more in the center of the face. So one thing you can do would be like kind of like an avoidance drill. So this would be where I'm going to put something in the way to kind of force me to hit this ball off the toe. So that way I'm avoiding hitting something. So you can use like a box. So I can take like a box like this, just put it like that, right? I'm going to put it on the ball like that. And now I've got to hit this ball without hitting that box. So that'd be like I'm trying to avoid things. And that helps a lot because a lot of what we do in life is just to avoid discomfort. Hitting this box here would be uncomfortable. You can put your head cover there. It'd be uncomfortable. Put it right there next to the ball and really try to avoid it. You'll be surprised at how much easier it is. Now, obviously, we can't do that out on the course. So you want to be able to transition away from that. But putting that there can show you like you can do it. It's just a matter of you want to be able to avoid something. Another thing is a T drill. So that'd be where here's my ball, and I'm going to put a T in the ground about an inch to the inside. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on trying to hit that T in the middle of the face. So if you imagine that T is right here, I'm going to focus on trying to hit that T in the middle of the face, and that can help you just move that strike to the toe. All right. So once you can kind of get the strike to be on the toe, what I would recommend doing is some strike training. I can show you a quick drill. So this is going to be a drill where we're going to hit it intentionally off of different parts of the club face. And you're going to have 3 tasks in this drill that you have to complete. The one task is going to be hitting it in the center of the face. And to be successful to hit it in the center of the face, we're going to say it has to be within a 1/4 inch of the center of the face. So we want to use something so that way we know for sure where we're hitting it on the face. We can use foot powder spray, or if you're using irons, my favorite way is called the dot method. So what you do with that is you take a dry erase or washable marker. You can use a Sharpie, but I like a dry erase or washable marker. It washes off the club a little bit easier, and it'll wash off the balls. My favorite marker for this is the Expo dry erase marker with the bullet tip, like a darker color, like a black or a blue or something like that. The bullet tip is like the perfect shape for a dimple on the ball. It perfectly fits in there. So basically you take the marker, you fill up a dimple on the ball with some ink, and then you situate that dimple with the dot on it to hit the face when you, so it'd be on the back of the ball, and then when you hit it, it'll rub off on the face. You'll be able to see where you're striking it. But foot powder spray works as well. You can use impact tape, but it's just not my favorite. It changes the flight and things like that. So foot powder spray or dot method, those, or marker method would be my preferred. So for a center strike, we want to be within a 1/4 inch of the center of the face. So if the strike is a little bit toward the toe, but within a 1/4 inch of the face, that would count as a center face strike. You don't have to be perfectly in the middle for this, for level 1. Now, as you get better at it, you'll want to get that. You'll need to make it a little bit more difficult, so that way you can continue to get better. But that's for the for level 1. So level 1, I'm going to go 1/4 inch toward the toe, 1/4 inch toward the heel. Within that, I can count that as a center face strike. For a toe strike, if I were to draw a line through the middle of the face, a majority of the strike, a majority of the imprint on the face or the dot, it has to be on the toe side of the club for it to count as a toe strike. And then for the heel side, same thing. If I draw a line right through the middle of the face, the strike has to be on the heel side of the face. So once I know what success is, I'm going to go through, I have to complete those tasks. And what we're going to use is we're going to use a system that's called win, pass, lose, stay. So what that means is if I'm successful, right, and I win, then I'm going to pass, right? I'm going to go on to the next task. If I'm unsuccessful, I lose, then I have to repeat the task. I'm going to stay on the task. I need to make an adjustment and stay on the task. So let's say I'm starting out here, and you can just, for this, I would just start out with like a middle iron, like an 8 iron, 7 iron, 6 iron, something like that. It's totally fine. So for all of these as well, I'm going to set up the same way. However you set up to the ball normally, which for most people is going to be in the center of the face, however you set up to the ball normally, that's how you're going to set up to this on every single one of them. So for the toe strike, you can't set up on the toe. Heel strike, you cannot set up on the heel. You are setting up where you normally set up. Now, if you normally set up on the heel, then you're setting up on the heel for all of them, whether it's the heel or the toe or the center, right? So you just set up to the ball the same way you normally do every single time. You're not making any sort of adjustment. All you're doing is making a swing where you're hitting it on a different part of the face, right? You're just changing your intention throughout. So let's say, and for the first rep, you have to declare what you're doing, right? You can't just hit the ball and then, oh, that's off the toe. That's going to count as my toe strike. Doesn't work that way. You have to declare what you're doing. So if you're going for the center face strike and you get it too far on the toe, that's a failure. You got to make an adjustment and then try again. So let's say I start out, I'm going to go for the center face strike, right? I go for it and I get it too far on the heel. Then I go for it again. Yeah, I make an adjustment to try to feel like I'm more on the toe. I overdo it. I get too far on the toe. Then on my third attempt, I get it pretty much right in the middle of the face. So now I'm at 3 attempts. It doesn't matter which one you do next. Just do one of them, but you have to declare it. So now I'm going to say I'm going to go for the heel strike. Let's say I do the heel strike and I get it right in the center. So I fail. I got to exaggerate it a little bit more, right? The next one, I get it on the heel. So now I'm up to two attempts on that, 5 attempts total. Now I'm going to do it again, and the toe is left. So now I'm going to go for the toe, and let's say I get the toe on the first try, right? So it's taken me 6 total attempts to do that. Now, you might be thinking, well, why on earth would I intentionally hit it off the toe and off the heel? Well, the reason is, there's been studies that have shown this, that if we know where both ends of the spectrum are, it's much easier for us to know where neutral is, where the middle is. All right. So if we can hit the ball in different parts of the face, it gives you a much better awareness of the face in general, and it helps you to be able to hit the ball in the middle of the face. Now, keep in mind the shots that you hit off the toe and the shots that you hit off the heel are not likely going to be great golf shots, right? They're probably going to feel terrible, but that's not the goal of this drill. Is not to hit great golf shots. The goal of this drill is to hit it on different parts of the face, right? So what I would do is I would repeat that drill until you can get 3 out of 3. Once you get 3 out of 3, then you make it more difficult. You can make it more difficult in many ways. You can make it more difficult by, let's say you're using an 8 iron for the drill. You go to a 6 iron. It's going to be more difficult with a 6 iron, right? Because the 6 iron is going to be it's a longer club, so it's a harder to control club, right? That's one way you can make it harder. Another way you can make it more difficult is by making what deems a successful heel or toe strike or center face strike, making that more difficult to achieve, right? So you could say, all right, well, before the center strike was within a 1/4 inch of the middle of the face. Well, I can change that to 1/8 of an inch. So basically I have a 1/4 inch window to hit it into, 1/8 inch on each side of the center of the face. I could say for a toe strike, it has to be on the toe, but it can't be too far off the toe. So I can't super exaggerate it like I was before. It has to be within, I could say it has to be within a 1/2 inch of the middle of the face, right? But on the toe side for that would make it considerably harder. Now I'm telling you, if you go through that and you're able to move the strike, less than a 1/2 inch this way toward the toe, less than a 1/2 inch that way toward the heel, and get it dead center and do that 3 out of 3 times, you're going to have a really great awareness of where the center of the face is. But it just takes some time to work up to that. So if you work through the drills like I talked about, you'll be able to do that eventually. All right, so Graham C said, hi Q, in your experience, what is the biggest block to driver swing speed, especially in the older golfer? What would be the best way to increase speed and negate this loss? Thanks. Creating a bigger hand path, right? And usually what I see in older golfers is they turn off the hips. They really don't turn their hips very much. So if we can unlock the legs, unlock the hips, and that helps us to turn and to create a longer hand path, that's going to allow you to be able to create more speed, because the more space and time that I have to create speed with my hands through the handle, the more speed I can generate at impact. So think about it this way. If I'm trying to get on the interstate, right, and I want to get up to speed, right, I want to have a nice long ramp to get up to speed. It's going to be very easy for me to get up to speed. But if you've ever gotten on an interstate ramp and like it's been under construction or something like that, a lot of times those ramps are a lot shorter, right? And it's harder to get up to speed. And a lot of times you're going a lot slower. Well, you didn't have enough space and time to accelerate your vehicle, comfortably to get on the interstate and be at the speed of everybody else, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Think about it this way as well. If I'm going sledding, right? Not a lot of us are sledding right now this time of year. But if you're going sledding, if you want to have the fastest speed at the bottom, what you're going to find is you're going to try to go find the tallest and steepest hill to sled down, right? If you sled down a short and flatter hill, you're just not going to have a lot of speed at the bottom. So that's what we want in the golf swing. We want to create more space and time to be able to create that speed. So that's typically what I see. So here are some tips to help you to kind of unlock things. So start from the ground up. What I like to see in almost all older golfers who maybe lack some flexibility would be to flare out those feet. The reason is that imagine if I set up pigeon-toed like this, it becomes very difficult to turn my hips. If I set up like this, that's as much as I can turn my hips that way, right? And I'm not a very flexible person, right? And that's as much as I can turn my hips. That's going to really restrict me. But now if I do that, right? Well, now look how much more I can turn my hips. It just unlocks things considerably, right? So flare out the feet. That'd be number one. The next piece would be in your knees, allow your knees to change flexes. So with my trail leg, I want to let my trail leg straighten out to push my hip back and around. I want to let my lead leg flex and move in, right? So again, it's going to flex and move in. And I also want to allow my heel to come off the ground, right? So a good way to kind of get the feel for this would be to take an alignment stick, put it on the ground, right? And put it at about a 45-degree angle to where you're going to stand. Then I'm going to take another alignment stick here, and I'm going to put this through my belt loops. And this is just going to give me a good indication of how much I'm turning my hips, right? And then I'm going to take my club here, and I'm just going to put my club on top of my shoulders here, right? So nice and high on my shoulders, should be basically against my neck. So now I'm going to straddle this stick here that's at a 45-degree angle. And what I want to do is I want to get this stick that's between my belt loops. I want to get that to go to either match or even go past that stick on the ground. And I want to get this club to the butt end of this club to get behind where the ball would be, right, to get past that 90 degrees. And if I flare out my feet and I let my knees change flex and I let my heel come off the ground, I can do this very easily, right? So you can see there, now I'm getting a nice big turn. My hips have turned past that and my shoulders are past that 90-degree point, right? This is how we get some good power, right? Well, when I see, older guys come into the distance clinics and things like that, a lot of times they're like this, right? They're not, they're setting up square, right? They don't really change flexing their legs, and they kind of go like this, right? And that's going to look like a golf swing that's like that. It's just not going to be very powerful, right? But if we can get to where we flare out the feet, we let the hips turn, right? Well, now I'm like this. Now I'm in a much, much more powerful position to be able to create speed, right? So that's typically what I see. That's the first thing that we do at the distance clinics. And it's the first thing that Clay has you do in the 20-minute distance fix, is the catapult drill. That's all about getting a bigger turn. So if you struggle with distance, the number one thing that you can do, in my experience and in my opinion, is to make sure that you are getting a good, sufficient turn. Because if you're keeping your lower body from turning, and you're not letting your shoulders turn, and you're just kind of doing everything all arms, it's going to be hard to create speed. Now, don't get me wrong. Most of your speed is going to come from your arms, but we need to create space for those arms to give you the speed, right? And we need to create momentum by creating that big turn. So that's what I would recommend doing. All right, let's keep going here. So Rich says, Q, should the club lag a little behind the golfer on a full swing, or should it always be in front of you? Repeat question, but I missed the answer. Yes, we want to lag the club. Clay talks about this in the Top Speed Lag course. So if you want to learn more about getting lag, I would check out the Top Speed Lag course. This is a part of the Top Speed Golf system. So if you want to check that out, you can click the instruction tab. From there, you can click the Top Speed Golf system. And then once you get to that page, you can click the Top Speed Lag. But yes, we want to have the club lagging behind us in the beginning of the downswing. And then from there, it's going to start releasing and getting back in front of us. But we want to get it to lag. That's how you can create speed. One way that you can create speed as well is to let the club lag. All right, let's keep going. So Steve says, I am working on shallowing and having trouble making my lower body turn to create consistent space in order to get a good impact position. Any tips? Well, if you're working on shallowing, I wouldn't be trying to turn so much, because if you're trying to rotate your body through, that's typically going to make you come down steep, right? Because rotation of the lower body is something that steepens the club, right? So for example, if I just go like that, you see how that steepens everything, right? So what we want to really feel like is that we're letting that club kind of fall and swing from the inside. What I would recommend doing is I would recommend putting a barrier down. So what that would look like would be, and Clay talks about this in the 20-minute shallowing fix, where you use an impact bag. You don't have to use an impact bag, but you can use a box or something like that. So you see I put this box right here. It's behind my ball a little bit. So now I'm just going to make swings where I focus on swinging and missing that box and getting that club to work from the inside. So that's just what I would recommend doing. And I think people are really overthink this stuff a little bit, because they're thinking way too mechanically on what they need to do. What I would recommend doing is I'd recommend putting the box down and just making the swing that avoids that, right? Because what you're going to do is what's intuitive to you, and that's what's going to work the best for you. There's lots of things you can do to shallow out the club. Lots and lots of things you can do. There's lots of levers that you can pull. There's several things. I've talked about this in past office hours. Well, we can talk about it again. So basically, again, I don't want you thinking about all of these things. These are just things that happen to shallow out the club. I want you to do what is most intuitive to you, to where, because I'm telling you, if you put this box down, right, and you swing and you avoid the box and you hit the ball, right, you're going to intuitively be doing all the things I'm about to talk about. You don't need to think about every little thing. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong with things, is they try to they're trying to do specific things in the swing, but that doesn't necessarily get you the results that you're looking for, right? So so it starts with the wrists, right? With the wrists, if I bow my lead wrist, extend back my trail wrist, got that bow that shallows out the club. My forearms, if I have a feeling I'm turning a doorknob to the right, if I'm right-handed, that's going to shallow out the club. In my shoulder joint, if I externally rotate and internally rotate, right? So this is losing the arm wrestling contest, win the arm wrestling contest, that shallows out the club, right? And then lowering my arms, that shallows out the club. My spine shallows out the club. So if I'm here, I have my hips level and I tilt my rib cage with my spine. You can see how that shallows out the club. These are all things that shallow out the club, right? Now, if you put that box down and you avoid hitting that box and you hit the ball, you're going to be doing those things automatically. Because if you were to do all of those to the max, right, you'd be too shallow, right? So just put the box down and then do what comes natural to you to avoid hitting that box, and you'll be good to go. And you may not be able to do it at full speed, so just slow down. Slow down, get to where you can do it slower, get better at doing it slower, then go a little bit faster. Get better at doing it a little bit faster, then basically work your way up to full speed. I think a lot of people will put this here and then they make swings and they're going full speed and they just keep smashing the box. And they're like, well, I just can't do it. You can do it. You just have to slow down to where you can do it, right? You may not be able to do it at full speed. So go at a speed that you think you can do it. Think about it this way. Do you think you could do it? If I said, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million if you hit this ball without you take a full swing, right? You don't have to go full speed, but you got to take a full swing with a full shoulder turn, right? You got to hit this ball and avoid hitting that box, right? Would you go at full speed then? Probably not, right? You probably slow down to where you could do it. That's the mindset that I want you to have with it. So slow down to where you can do it. You're going to get better at it going slower, and then you'll be able to go a little bit faster, right? But you have to get better at it first. I use typing as an analogy all the time because I think a lot of people can relate to this. When you first started typing, you couldn't go fast, right? Because if you did, it would be bad. Like you wouldn't select the right keys. But eventually, you started to gain awareness of where all the keys were, and you got better and you got faster and faster. And basically, you got to, from one point, at least for me, I got to where I was going like this, right? To having my hands on the keyboard, looking at the screen and just doing that and going pretty fast and having it completely automatic and not doing it, doing it without any conscious thought or anything like that. That's because I slowed down to where I did it correctly. And then I gradually progressed it. And I got better and better and better and better at it until I was able to basically do it autonomously, right? Anything like that, playing a musical instrument, driving a car, all these things, you all start out doing these things slow. So if you're ever trying to learn a skill, which would be the skill of shallowing out the club, you have to slow down to where you can do it and then build it up from there, right? So if you take that approach, you'll be in much better shape with it. All right, so Rich says, cue real time watching you turn your shoulders with the alignment rod, but when I turn my shoulders more, I break down and club drops down too much. Thanks. What do you mean club drops down too much? The club should be angled down. We don't want to be turning like this, right? It should be angled down. So I don't understand what the issue is. So Steve says, perfect. Thank you for the shallowing tips. I have some good things to work on. Typing analogy helped. Yeah. I really like that. That's the analogy that I found that works the best because it also, when you're trying to change things in your swing, that when things are happening the fastest, it's very similar to learning how to type. But the problem is that with golf, you're already swinging the club, right? You've already learned how to swing the club. Your brain has a program that it essentially runs to swing the club. That's what it knows how to do right now. That's what it knows how to do fast. So when you're trying to change something that's at the fastest point of the swing, so someone trying to work on early extension or someone trying to work on getting shaft lean, and things like that. It's not as simple as I'm just going to do this drill for the range for one day and I'm going to have shaft lean. Unfortunately, it just does not work that way. It works more like, okay, you've learned how to type. You can type on a standard keyboard proficiently and look at the screen and make very minimal errors just typing normally. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that keyboard and I'm going to completely scramble up the keys. It's going to be totally random. No key is going to be in the same spot. Well, now you have to learn how to type on that keyboard again, right? So that's how it's actually a little bit more difficult to change things because you've already learned one way to do it. And you maybe heard the term, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You certainly can. There's parts of it that are a little bit more difficult because you're going to have your old program kind of trying to bring you back, right? Your old motor patterns trying to bring you back. But it's going to be easier in the sense that you've already learned to do this, right? You've already learned how to do something like this. And it's not like you're totally going from scratch, right? So there's parts of it that are a little bit harder that make it difficult, right? And there's parts of it that are a little bit easier as well. So like I said, learning how to implement shaft lean in your swing. If you're someone who does not have any shaft lean or very little shaft lean, going from that to having a lot of shaft lean, like pro-like level shaft lean, it's like learning how to type proficiently and then taking the keys and completely scrambling them, and now you have to learn how to type proficiently. And going back to like the $1 million bet, right? If I gave you $1 million, you have to type up this letter. You have as much time as you want to type it, right? But it has to be typed correctly. There cannot be one single typo in it. How would you type the letter? You'd probably type it pretty dang slow, making sure every letter was correct. But that's not the approach that a lot of people take to changing their golf swing. What a lot of people do is they just try to go to full speed, and if it doesn't work, then they just quit, right? Well, then they just like, well, that doesn't work for me. And then they look for a different drill. That doesn't work for me. Unfortunately, you're going to keep searching for drills. You're not going to believe that any of them work for you because you're not letting it work for you because you're not going slow enough to be able to do the motion. You have to go slow enough to be able to do the motion. You'll never learn how to do something if you don't do it, if you don't break it down and do it correctly. If you just try to go fast and you just do the same way, you're just going to get super frustrated, right? Break it down to where you can do it, and then you build it up from there. Anything you've ever learned to do, you've always done it that way. You just don't realize it. All right. So Steve says I was going to use a box and some alignment sticks, also get the inside-outside path. I think you have mentioned this in the past to assist also. Yeah. So you said some alignment sticks. So I like alignment sticks as well. My personal favorite would be something like this. So this is the swing plate. If you are interested in a swing plate, all this swing plate is just a heavy metal plate that has basically a holster for the alignment stick. It can set it at any angle you want. And then you can just slide the pool noodle over it. If you want to pick one of these up, you can go to the instruction tab at the top of the screen, and then or not the instruction tab. Go to the tools or resources. I can't remember which one they use, but that page lists all the training aids and stuff that we recommend. You click the link from there to pick it up. These are a little bit expensive. I believe it's over $100. I wish it wasn't that expensive, but I'm formerly in the engineering field. I know it does cost quite a bit of money to make these kinds of things until it kind of takes off. Once it takes off and you can order large quantities, you can drive the price down quite a bit. But most of the time, they won't drive the price down because they've already set the price. They might be able to do more sales and things like that. But in the beginning stages of a business like this, unfortunately, it's going to be expensive just because it just costs a lot of money to get these made in small quantities and stuff like that. So anyway, I love it though. I think it's a great product. I actually like to use it outside as well because, you can just move this around, right? Whereas the stick, you got to stick it back in, then you got to stick it at the right angle and all that stuff. It's kind of a pain in the neck. Whereas this, you can just move it around. You can just adjust it very easily. If you're using it on mats, where it's concrete, you can't put a stick in the ground. It's, these are really, really nice. You can also make something very similar to this. I didn't pay for this. This was sent to us. I did have one. You've probably seen it in some of the videos that I made with a block of wood, scrap wood that I had in my garage here, and a flagpole holder that I got from like Home Depot, right? So it doesn't work as good as this does, but it works fine. But if you want to kind of have a homemade DIY version, you could do that. But basically the way that you set this up is you're going to set it up at the angle of the club, the lie angle of the club. So this is a wedge, so the lie angle is going to be a little bit more upright. So you can see that's the lie angle of the club. If you're not sure what the lie angle of the club is, basically if I have this club flush to the ground like this angle that's being created by the shaft in the ground, that's the lie angle. So the way that I'm finding this is I'm just holding this club flush to the ground, and then I'm getting the stick to match the angle of the shaft, right? So now I got that set up, and what's nice with the swing plate, I like to align it with the edge of this swing plate. So this is basically my target line, right? And if you're putting the stick in the ground, it'd be probably about 6 inches to the inside of it, right? So now I'm going to set up to this, right? And the reason why I like this a little bit more is because with the box, you can kind of stand up out of it and cheat it. You can still do it here, but it's not as easy, right? If I really stand, my hands are typically going to hit this. So it's basically forcing me to get my hands low, get that club from the inside. If you find yourself in where you're really going like this to kind of avoid that, and you're kind of cheating it too much, then what you can do is you can take another one of these and put it right here. And now you can't do that because now you're going to hit that, right? Because it's forcing you to get your hands in the club to kind of work to the left after impact. So that way you're not kind of cheating it by pushing the hands out and the club out too much. So I like this quite a bit as well. That's a way that you can a drill that you can do to shallow out the club as well. But not everybody has one of those. I imagine everybody's got an old box around the house, or that they got from Amazon or something. All right. Well, let's keep going here. So Steve says doing it slowly will help very much. I agree. So Rich says Q, by drop down, I mean John Daly driver swing way past parallel, then cannot get back to make good contact. Trying to make full shoulder turn swing, but not go too far. Thanks. Well, you can do a John Daly swing. That's totally fine. It works really well for him. So, there's nothing wrong with the John Daly swing. I'm not flexible enough. I would make sure that you're not really breaking down your arms a ton to get really past parallel. Because most people, you may be different, Rich. You may be very flexible, and if you are, then great. But most people aren't going to be able to make a John Daly type swing like legitimately. So I'd look on video to see, okay, are you getting past parallel by doing this, or are you getting past parallel by getting a full shoulder turn, and then you're basically your lead arm is fairly straight. Now, if it has a little bit of bend in it, that's totally fine. But if we're breaking down the arms to like 90 degrees, that's not you're not creating space the way that you want to. You're kind of narrowing things up. So I would just try to feel like your hands are as far away from your chest as they can be, and then whatever turn you're making from there is totally good. And I would venture to say also to make sure that you're not losing your spine angle. That's another way that a lot of people lengthen their swing. And this, if you reverse your spine angle at the top of the swing, that can also make it very, very difficult to hit the ball solid. So what that would look like is something like this, right? If I'm going like this, right, where I'm leaning my spine toward the target, that's going to make it very, because I'm going to tend to fall away in the downswing. So I want to keep my spine angled away like this. So that way I'm staying behind the ball and I can move into the ball. I can move my weight to the left as I'm starting the downswing. If you're leaning toward your head toward, then you're gonna have to fall back because you can't keep leaning toward, because then you're just gonna end up getting too far out in front of it. No problem, Rich. Glad to help. All right, we got about 13 minutes left here. So Steve says, could you discuss your approach to short 30 to 80-yard pitch shots for best accuracy and distance control? Yeah, you got to practice it. So what I would start out with is a clock system, getting a good feel for the clock system. So what the clock system is, it's basically thinking of where your hands are would be on a clock, right? So if I'm going right here, that's going to be about a 7:30 swing, right? If I go here, that's a 9 o'clock swing. If I go here, that's a 10:30 swing, right? So what I would do is I'd take your wedge and or your wedges, and see how far you hit the ball with all of those length of swings, right? And keep the same rhythm and tempo on all of them. So what I mean by that is, on the shorter one, don't go super fast through, right? We're just going to go to there, and we're going to go from there. If I go to the 9 o'clock swing, I'm going to go there, and it's just going to be a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer, right? But I'm keeping the same rhythm and tempo. If I do that, I'm going to have a little bit more speed down at the bottom. That's going to help me as I lengthen the swing, and that's going to help me to hit the ball farther, right? Because as I talked about earlier, the longer your hand path is, typically, the more speed you can generate. So if I take a longer hand path and I just have the same rhythm and tempo through the ball, I'm going to have a little bit more speed at the bottom. And that's going to help the ball to go farther, right? So I'm going to see for all my wedges, for me, I carry a 58, 54, and a 50. I'm going to see how far all of those goes with the clock system. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choke up an inch on the club, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to see how far those go, and I'm going to write this down, by the way. Then I'm going to choke up 2 inches, and I'm going to see how far those go. And then if you're not down to the middle yet, I would go basically where you're all the way down to almost to the metal, and see how far you hit it with those swings. So you're going to be able to cover a lot of ground between there. So now you can see, okay, all right, I have a 60-yard shot. I know that that's a 54-degree where I choke up 1 inch, a 54-degree 9 o'clock swing choked up 1 inch, right? And then I just know it, and I can just hit that, right? Now, it's not going to be perfect every single time. There's a lot to go. If you don't hit the ball, if you chunk it a little bit, it's going to go shorter. If you blade it a little bit, it's probably going to go longer. If you hit it off the heel, you hit it off the toe, it's probably not going to go as far, right? So, I wouldn't look at it always. Your rhythm and tempo you might be a little bit sped up. You might hit a little bit too hard, or maybe you do a 9 o'clock swing and you accidentally go a little bit farther than 9 o'clock, or a little bit shorter, right? So it's not always going. It's going to take practice, but that would be kind of the way I would start with it. Now, let's say that you don't have let's say you have a shot that's 55 yards and you don't have a club, you don't have a swing and a choked up thing that goes exactly 55 yards. Well, you can take the whatever's in between it. So let's say you could take what I just did, and maybe instead of a 9 o'clock swing, it's just like an 8:30 swing. It's just to there, right? So I know that my 9 o'clock swing choked up 1 inch goes 60. If I have 55, I'm going to take the choke up 1 inch, but instead of a 9 o'clock swing, I'll bring it to like right here, and that'll take a little bit off of it, right? So that'd be kind of the way I'd go about it initially. initially that's the way I would go about it. Once you kind of get good at that, then what I would do, because tour players, it's all about feel, right? They feel it, and that takes practice to develop that feel. It's a skill. So what I would recommend doing is to try to get a feel for how hard you need to hit it, for how much you need to give it to get the ball to go where you need it to go, and that's going to come through training. So there's lots of training aids or launch monitors, like low cost ones. I know that pretty sure the Swing Caddy used to do it. I know there's other ones that aren't super high price that you can give it a range. I know the SkyTrack does this as well, but that's kind of above. I think SkyTrack's like $2,000 or something like that. I was thinking more in the neighborhood of like $500 to $1,000 launch monitors. I'm pretty sure that they do this as well. Some of them do. But what you can do is you can give the monitor a range of yardages until it will give you a random number, right? And then you can try to hit to those numbers. And through that process, you will learn, right? So let's say it gives you 62 yards, right? Well, you swing what feels like a 62-yard swing, right? And let's say it goes 70. Well, now you learn that's that field that was a little too hard, right? If you keep doing that, you're going to start learning in what it feels like to hit a ball a certain distance, right? And you're going to gain that feel. I don't know if you've seen like those. There's videos out there where they'll be like Dustin Johnson and Sky Scheffler. They might be TaylorMade videos, but they'll get on the TrackMan and they'll hit a shot and they'll tell you how far it went before because they can just feel it. They know. And this is like, they're hitting like some of them, they're hitting like 3-wood driver, or they'll have it where they'll tell them like, okay, you got to hit this one, 187, right? And then they'll make a swing and they'll be so darn close to it. And that's just because they're so dialed in to their distances and the feels and things like that. And that's just something you have to develop, right? You have to develop that. It's not something that you're just going to have. You have to develop it. Now, if you don't have a launch monitor, here's something you can do as well. And I would recommend doing this with a buddy to have a little competition, and because one, it's going to be fun if you have a little competition, but also it's going to introduce some pressure. Put a little, I'm not, or I would, like Phil Mickelson says, I'm not a betting man, right? But put a little scratch in there, right? Have a little bit of fun with it. Put some pressure on yourself because that's what's happening on the course. And what you can do is bring a deck of cards, and what you can do, you can take out the face cards, or you can use them. You can just make those. So like, for example, if you keep the face cards in there, like the Jack could be 110, the Queen could be 120, King could be 130 if you want to go up that long. But if you want to keep it like under 100 yards, like if you just want to keep it, basically 30 to 100 yards, then what you can do is take out the aces, the deuces, and leave 3 through 10 in there. And what you do is you just scramble up the cards, shuffle the cards, and draw a card. And if it's a 5, you're going for 50 yards, right? So you get a random generator right there. And what you can also do is you can say the red cards are going to be the number in a 0, and then the black cards are going to be a number and a 5. So if you draw a red 5, that's going to be 50. If you draw a black 5, that'll be 55, right? And that way you're getting 5-yard increments in there. Now it's not going to be as random. You're not going to get a 63-yard shot or whatever, but it's going to be it's going to be a nice randomness of numbers. And just play a game where you just get closest to the pin or whatever, closest to the number, and have a little game with a buddy, and see who comes out on top in the end. That's a fun game that you can play to help you dial in those wedge distances. All right. All right. So Steve Gass for the clock. Are you discussing, do you change the space between your feet at all? Narrower or wider for different distances? I personally do. You don't have to, but I personally do. And for me, I just do it based on feel. So the wider your feet are, the more stability you have, right? But the less kind of mobility you have through the shot typically. So I basically try to keep my feet as narrow as I can, um, to have the stability. So basically, if I'm hitting a 30-yard shot, I'll have my feet about like this, because I mean a 30-yard shot is only that, right? So I don't need a ton of stability because there's not a lot of speed going. I don't need a lot of stability there. But if I'm going from a 30-yard shot and now I have about an 80-yard shot, 80-yard shot will be more like this, where my feet are a little bit wider. I have a little bit more stability, but I can still get through the shot. So I personally am doing that, but that's something you kind of have to work out for yourself. If you find that you're better keeping the wideness of your stance, keeping that consistent the whole time, then by all means do that. But for me, I like to have it. I like to have it. I base it on what I feel is best for the shot. I put my feet in the position to where I feel like I can make the best swing to get the desired result that I want. So sometimes they'll be a little bit closer for the shorter ones, and then generally they'll get a little bit farther apart as I take longer swings, because I need that little bit more stability. So Steve goes on and says, Trace Bien, thanks much. Have not been able to listen to your office hours for a long time. It has been fun to participate again. Thanks for doing this. No problem, Steve. Glad to have you back. Come back again. Steve has one last question. For the short shots, how much weight shift is there? A lot less. Yeah, generally, especially short ones. Shorter ones, because what we have to understand is why are we doing a weight shift? Well, we do a weight shift to generate power, right? And we don't need power for a lot of these shots. So, like I said, if I have a 30-yard shot, I'm going to be kind of favoring my lead side. I'm really just going to try to stay there mostly, right? Now, again, this is where everybody is a little bit different. You might find where you just stay very balanced throughout, and that works better for you, right? For me, if I try to do that, I tend to hang back a little bit, and I end up kind of either chunking or thinning it. So I like to kind of favor my lead side and try to keep it there mostly, because that helps me to kind of stay forward and help my the bottom of my swing be where it needs to be, more consistent. But again, everybody's a little bit different. I've heard instruction from top level short game guys say we want to have a weight shift in it. And I've heard other guys say you want to have your weight forward. And really, when you hear stuff like that, when you hear an instructor, who's obviously a very good instructor and also a really good player in his own right, and you're hearing what he says he does, and obviously it works very well for him and the students that he might be working with. And then you have another guy that says something completely opposite, right? And they're a great player too, and then all their students are great players. What that tells me is that there's lots of different ways to do it, right? There's not one way. You can shift your weight. You just have to find what works the best for you. That's really what it comes down to. And that's why I don't deal in absolutes. I'm not someone who will sit here and say you absolutely must shift your weight forward. You absolutely must stay on your back foot or whatever. Everybody's a little bit different. You really have to kind of work out to find what works best for you. Sometimes I'll be working with a student and I'll tell them one thing and they'll say, yeah, it's not really working. I'm chunking a thing. I was like, well, I want you to try it this way, right? A lot of times when an instructor's helping you, they're making their best educated guess to what's going to work the best, or they're playing the averages. Like, this is what I found works the best for most people. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work the best for you. So that's the way you kind of want to look at it. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great weekend, and I'll talk to y'all next time.